Welcome into ABC News Live. I am Will Reeve. A lot to get to on this Friday, including tragedy on a lake in Missouri. Was it avoidable? And President Trump wants Putin to visit the White House. Why? But first, here are your headlines on Friday, July 20th.
Miami Dolphins players who protest on the field during the anthem could be suspended for up to 4 games. And other NFL teams were expected to follow suit with their own anthem policy. But late Thursday, the NFL and the Players Union agreed to halt any enforcement of rules regarding the anthem while the two sides work on a resolution. This after the union filed a grievance on the NFL's anthem policy.
15 states are now suing the Environmental Protection Agency over a decision to roll back pollution limits on trucks with older engines that don't meet current standards. The EPA says the policy is being rolled back to avoid hurting businesses that make the trucks. There are new tensions rising between North and South Korea. The North now says a reunion of families next month, separated by the war, may not happen. North Korean officials are now demanding that the South return some of its citizens first.
Wells Fargo is getting ready to refund tens of millions of dollars to customers. Wall Street Journal says the refunds are for all sorts of services tacked on to bills that customers may not have fully understood. And a warning to Fortnite players to be on the lookout for scammers. A 13-year-old Ohio boy gave his user info to another person who promised to improve his account. Instead, the scammer rang up hundreds of dollars of charges on his mom's credit card.
I feel sorry for him, but I also have told him it's a lesson learned. I think it's an eye-opener, when it happens to you.
Our top story today out of Missouri, at least 11 people have died after a tour boat capsized and sank on a lake in Missouri. There were severe thunderstorms. Several other people have been hospitalized, and we are joined now live by Matt Mershon at our affiliate KATV in Branson, Missouri. Matt, thank you so much for being with us to walk us through what exactly happened.
Good morning, Will. You mentioned that number has now been updated. They found 2 extra bodies in the water overnight, bringing the total number of fatalities here to 13. They are still looking for 4 more people who are missing on Table Rock Lake. That is where we are. We just heard from the Stone County Sheriff and the Governor of Missouri, Mike Parson, just a few minutes ago, updating us on this whole situation. 7 people, from what we understand, remain hospitalized, 1 in serious condition. We understand children are part of the fatalities being reported here. They're blaming strong storms that had come through the area last night as the reasoning to why this Duckboat, it's a land and sea-bearing mode of transportation, if you will, that's what they think that caused that Duckboat to capsize and sink in Table Rock Lake, and that boat is still there at this very time, Will.
Matt, just looking at the video, it's incredible video. It's terrifying video. It looks terrifying to have been out there. Why did they go?
Well, this is a tourist destination. Branson is a big vacation spot here in southern Missouri, and from what we understand, a lot of the people on this boat were tourists. Whether or not the weather was good when they got on that boat, that we don't necessarily know, and they weren't able to answer the question of whether or not they knew that there were severe thunderstorm warnings while they were on the lake last night.
Now, what is the operator of the Duckboat company saying about the role that they played in this event?
We have not heard from them. They were not here at this press conference today. From what we understand, they just recently had taken over that company that provides these Duckboat tours. But from what investigators have told us, they are fully cooperating with authorities.
All right, Matt Mershon, thank you for giving us the latest from Branson, Missouri, where a tragedy unfolded yesterday. 13 people now, the updated tally on the number dead in that accident on a lake in Missouri. There's severe weather all over the country in the summer. That is always the case. And as always, Rob Marciano can help us out to make sense of what exactly is going on. He joins us by phone now. Rob, thank you so much for being with us here. As far as this event in Missouri goes, what, if any, warning signs were there that the weather was going to be so precarious?
Well, Will, for one thing, there was already a severe thunderstorm watch posted for much of Missouri at least 2 hours prior to when this storm fired up. And then there was a severe thunderstorm warning that was issued at 6:31 p.m. local time for Taney County as a line of strong storms was moving from the northwest towards the southeast, towards Branson, towards Table Rock Lake. So there was ample warning. This was a pretty unusual storm for July, but we do get severe thunderstorms in July, and then this one certainly was one you did not want to be out on a boat. The question is, why didn't they get the warning as tour boat operators?
We're all used to having our phones go crazy with weather warnings for various reasons, flood warnings often in this part of the country in New York City. Could you explain exactly how these severe weather alerts and push notifications and all that sort of work?
Well, for years we've always told people to have a weather radio, a government-issued NOAA weather radio that you could set to different alerts and sensitivities on your end. And this way, if there was some sort of bad weather or threatening weather in your area, you get those warnings. Now, with obviously our phones are more advanced, there's apps that you can program to do these sort of things. In 2012, as being part of a weather-ready nation, NOAA started sending out severe weather alerts, much like you get Amber Alerts on your phone. Now, they're not for every form of weather. They're for tsunamis, tornadoes, extreme wind in the form of a hurricane or a typhoon, storm surge, that sort of thing, and flash flood warnings, of course, but not severe thunderstorm warnings. So this would not gone off on a phone. It would have had to be on a specialized app that a passenger or tour boat operator had. They would have had to have a weather radio or listen to local authorities or local television. One, if not all of that, should have been implemented by any tour company operating, especially outside, especially on a lake. So they had warning as far as a watch a couple of hours in advance, and they had a 30 minutes warning as far as the warning itself coming from this severe weather that had winds gusting over 60 miles an hour. So in my opinion, a preventable event, very sad and certainly frightening when you see those pictures.
Rob, quickly before we let you go, just want to know, is weather like this par for the course in that part of the country at this time of year, or is this unusual?
Well, we've got an unusual setup for July. We had a number of tornadoes rip through Iowa yesterday that did some serious damage to Marshalltown, Iowa, and we have a similar setup today as the system moves off towards the east, getting into more populated areas of the Ohio River Valley and the mid-Mississippi Valley and the mid-South. We do get severe thunderstorms throughout the summer. You get a lot of heat built up, a lot of humidity, and we get those things to pop in the afternoon. And we've all been in those storms that can bring winds in excess of 60 miles an hour. So that's not unusual. Yesterday's event as a whole across the country was certainly unusual for July. And today, people who live in the storm zone need to keep an eye to the sky and keep your phone and weather apps handy because it could get rough in some spots, Will.
That's ABC meteorologist Rob Marciano joining us via phone to explain the weather surrounding that tragic event in Missouri yesterday. Rob also mentioned tornadoes that swept through the state of Iowa. He mentioned Marshalltown. That is where we find our Marcus Moore. At least 17 people are injured. That number probably expected to rise. Marcus, thank you for joining us. We'll start here. What is the status of the people and the place where you are?
Well, Will, so far, the status here of the people is they're very relieved. They are grateful that despite all of the damage that you see here in this part of the historic downtown part of this Marshalltown community, only minor injuries reported. In fact, this is a grocery store that you're looking at. Difficult to tell but this was a grocery store. The storm hit yesterday evening, and the people who own this, they literally had to crawl out of that place to safety after the storm came through. This is really the epicenter of the scene here in this part of Iowa. As you know, more than 24 tornadoes touched down last night, and they skipped across Des Moines and also some of the suburbs of that, including Marshalltown, which is about an hour away. And this is what we see here. If you're familiar with this area, this is East State and Center Street, and those street signs have been knocked down, and you see all of the damage here, Will. This building has collapsed entirely onto some cars. It looks like a Honda there and a little Nissan that were no match for the debris that fell on top of those cars. Just gives you a sense of how powerful this storm was when it moved through. And we have also seen incredible videos of the storm hitting, including the one that hit Marshalltown, and we saw the twister as it caused all of this damage, and even more videos showing another twister tearing up homes and businesses. Just a reminder of Mother Nature's awesome power. Also here in Iowa at a factory not far away from here, we saw an incredible scene where the storm hit the factory, and it picked up cars and threw them around. And if we have that video, go ahead and play that, and you will see the cars stacked up on top of one another. Just an unbelievable thing to see, and especially when you consider what happened, and then there's only minor injuries, Will, reported. People here are very thankful, and I can tell you that already we are seeing the process of people trying to put their lives back together, and we hear the sound of backhoes that are moving debris, clearing them from the sidewalks and from the roadways, and we're also seeing people going through what's left of the buildings and businesses here as they are trying to clean up. Certainly, as you can see here, it's going to be a very long process, but they have a lot of people behind them as they do that. Not only residents here in Marshalltown, but also I've seen volunteers and obviously the first responders who commit their lives to keeping people safe and helping them recover. Will act. Back to you.
Marcus, it's clearly a harrowing scene, and we're glad that people are mostly okay and they're in good spirits and that the cleanup efforts have begun. But where is the threat level today? Are they out of the woods?
There's still a threat for weather for this part of the region. You heard talking about the setup that still exists for the potential for more severe weather. So it's still there. I can tell you that it stopped raining here right now. It's an overcast day, and for the most part here in Marshalltown, they should be in the clear, and that is good news, Will, as they are continuing that process of trying to clean up and recover from this devastating storm.
That's Marcus Moore in Iowa. Thank you, Marcus. Tornadoes ripping through the central part of the state. There's severe weather all over the country, and who better to explain what's going on there than our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z.
Well, thank you. Such an intense severe weather outbreak, especially for Iowa this time of year. It's been a really quiet severe weather time. And we look at the tornadoes. There were 27 reported tornadoes in Iowa alone. Watching that low transition and move slightly southeast today, it's very concerning for hail, of course, the potential for tornadoes, CAPE, the convective available potential energy that we look at. There's a threshold around 2,000 that we say, okay, this is going to be an active day. Today, 5,000 to 6,000. joules per kilogram. So that's a big day and a potential for that happening in Kentucky and Tennessee. And then it comes with a lot of rain too. So remember, flash flooding is always one of those effects of some of those severe storms that you can end up seeing. Let's then talk about the heat and the wildfires. The substation fire burning in Oregon, at least 50,000 acres. That's not going to get too much relief, and certainly going into next week, we're going to have a lot of excessive heat. But look at the excessive heat settling in for the weekend for Texas, Oklahoma, and even Arkansas and Louisiana. The numbers for Friday afternoon here, 110 that feels like in Memphis, 110 Greenville, 113 Shreveport. Next week, Sunday through Thursday, they're putting out warnings already. Burbank will get into that 102 range by midweek. Palm Springs and Phoenix Phoenix. Look at Phoenix at 118. And finally, I just want to leave you on one last note, Will. You see the debris floating around one of those tornadoes in Iowa. This is something that we're going to be watching again today. Heart of it happens from southern Michigan into northern Alabama. But again, Tennessee and Kentucky, watch for, unfortunately, the potential for something like this to happen right here on our Friday.
That's Ginger Z with an update on the severe weather around the country. Thank you, Ginger. Moving now to the Beltway. News out of D.C. that the Trump administration is planning to extend an invitation to Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit the White House this fall, just days after their summit in Helsinki that has caused so much news all week. To bring us up to speed, we go live to the White House North Lawn, where David Wright is with us. David, I ask you this, why is the president planning to invite the Russian president to the White House?
Well, this is a question that a lot of folks here in Washington are asking themselves right now. The whole thing, a bit of a head scratcher here, but yesterday, late in the afternoon, Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, tweeted out that in Helsinki, the president agreed to ongoing working level dialogue between the two Security Council staffs, and President Trump asked Ambassador John Bolton, his national security advisor, to invite President Putin to Washington in the fall, and those discussions are already underway. Now, the reason why this is a bit of a head scratcher is, one, they already had a summit just a couple of days ago. Two, nobody knows what they agreed to behind closed doors, and that's been a cause of concern here in Washington among Democrats and Republicans. Because three, the president has changed his message a number of times over the course of the week. He came in for a lot of criticism for refusing to confront Putin in person on the issue of Russian meddling in the elections, as well as other issues that have been percolating between these two countries for years, including the Russian incursion into eastern Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. The president has had to walk back several times in the course of the week things that he said in that initial press conference in Helsinki. Russia has become a bit of a hot potato here, particularly his relationship with Vladimir Putin. So why the president would extend another invitation to Putin so quickly after the last summit, which caused so much concern, and also ahead of the midterm elections, that's what has people wondering.
On the topic of walkbacks, what are the latest developments on the most recent walkback from comments made earlier this week, specifically concerning the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul?
That's right. Michael McFaul was one of the people identified by Putin as what Russia considers to be an enemy of the state almost. They want the opportunity to question McFaul, and this came up at the summit with Russia's offer to allow Robert Mueller's staff to interview the dozen or so Russians who've been indicted in the Russia probe on Russian soil in the presence of Russian security. In exchange for that, he wanted the opportunity to have Russian security operatives interview Mike McFaul. That was a non-starter up and down the political spectrum here in Washington. Finally, the White House issued a statement late yesterday afternoon saying that while Putin offered this to do this in sincerity, to have Mueller go over there, they would politely refuse the offer.
That's David Wright, live on the White House North Lawn. David, thank you. Discussing everything about the potential invitation for Vladimir Putin to come to the White House, which was news to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, who was live on stage at the Aspen Security Forum. It's an annual conference featuring big names and big minds from defense, security, intelligence. It's a moment that you really just need to see.
The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again? That's going to be special.
And we bring in Tara Palmieri now live in Aspen. Lots of laughs there, Tara, with Andrea Mitchell up on stage with DNI Dan Coats. But this is no laughing matter. What was the reaction to his reaction?
I mean, inside the White House, they saw that as a sign of betrayal. But clearly, what Dan Coates is showing is that he's baffled by the president's courtship of Russian President Vladimir Putin. But they saw him as yucking it up around the global elites in Aspen and defying the president yet again. I mean, he has already publicly come out and said that he would have not advised the president to have a one-on-one meeting with Putin in Helsinki without anyone else around except translators. He's made it pretty clear where he stands, even after the president said in that press conference that he couldn't see why Russia would meddle in the elections, and that he heard Vladimir Putin's denials and accepted them. And hours later, Dan Coates said, guess what? We stand by our findings that the Russians meddled in the 2016 elections, and they remain a threat. So clearly, there's a perception that Dan Coates is going rogue, whereas his colleague, FBI Director Chris Wray, said the same thing. I mean, he reaffirmed that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. So did Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein at the Securities at Aspen Institute. It seems that in this beautiful Aspen location, this bubble created by the Security Forum, President Trump's top law enforcement and intelligence officials are making it clear where they stand. While he wavers back and forth, did Russia meddle, did it not? He seems to be using different words, wouldn't, would. Are they still a threat? He said no, then they walked back. That they are making it very clear that Russia meddled in the 2016 election and they remain a threat. Well,
Tara, how unusual is it for a president's top intelligence official to break away from the president's stance so publicly like this?
It's highly unusual. But then again, it's highly unusual to hear an American president siding with a Russian president, and this whole thing has been quite surreal. And so it's not unusual. I mean, it's interesting because FBI Director Chris Wray, he hinted in an interview here in Aspen that he was considering resigning after the Helsinki summit. He said, I'm a soft-spoken type of guy, I'm understated, but I have a spine. And he wouldn't deny that he considered resigning after the president sided with Vladimir Putin's denials about Russian meddling over his own intelligence community. So, this is a unheard of situation. And as you can see, therefore, the intelligence and law enforcement officials are top in the country are acting in ways that are considered unheard of.
Now, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is also at the conference, and he made some news regarding Russia. What exactly did he have to say?
Well, he said that he will now be publicly making it known when it appears that there's any sort of disinformation campaign or meddling from any foreign government, letting the public know in advance, unlike President Obama, who was criticized for not getting in front of the issue during the 2016 elections. He also seemed to be sort of countering President Trump's witch hunt line, saying meddling, no matter what it is, should not be politicized by Republicans or Democrats. He made it clear that it's patriotic to confront this and attack it head on. It has nothing to do with politics. And President Trump has made it really clear that he sees the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into collusion and meddling as a witch hunt, something led by the Democrats. And it's very clear from his top law enforcement and intelligence officials that they do not agree with him. They see this as a required and necessary investigation. They're all pretty much banding together. And in Washington, there is a perception that they're sort of banding together against the president, surrounded by this elite in the security community, yucking it up, laughing at the president's idea that he would meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin again. Well,
that's Tara Palmieri. Tara, thank you. Live from the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado. Shifting gears now, police are doubling the cash reward for generating any new leads on finding the suspect of a murder of a father of two in Malibu Creek State Park last month. Will Carr is there with the latest.
Good morning, Will. Authorities still on the hunt for a killer in the campground death of a father. The LA Times reporting there are 2 new reports of shots fired in the past week near the same campground where Tristan Bodette was shot and killed while sleeping in a tent with his 2 young daughters. We spoke with a woman who was camping nearby that night. She says that she heard 4 shots crack through the air. The blast woke her up. At the time, she didn't realize anybody had been hurt, so she went back to sleep. But the next morning, a deputy woke her up and asked if she'd seen anything. She says her heart is broken for the victim's family since the shooter has still not been arrested. Investigators are being tight-lipped with exactly what they've learned so far, and they're not releasing the medical examiner's report at this point. There have been at least 7 separate shootings in this state park since 2016. That's when James Rogers was shot in the arm while sleeping in a hammock. The shooter in that case never found. Police now looking for connections with all of the shootings as they're upping their reward, in this case to $30,000 for any information that leads to an arrest.
Will Carr in Malibu. I am Will Reeve in New York City, and that is all we have time for today here at ABC News Live. But remember, we are with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the app. You can catch us there or at abcnews.com/live. We've got you covered wherever you want or need to be. Take care.